But nothing. This regional has the same. Good, how are you? Good. Regional has. The same.
All right. So welcome, everybody. We are going to get started. Welcome to our second budget consultation for the Town of Stewiacke 2025-2026 draft budget. For the public's knowledge, we are broadcasting on Zoom tonight so people can listen. And if anybody has any questions following the presentation, they can be sent into Town Hall at town@stewiacke.net or feel free to call Town Hall and our staff can answer any question. The budget presentation that you'll see this evening is on our town website if anybody online wishes to access that. This is our second budget consultation. We brought the draft budget to council on Thursday, February 27th for the first presentation. We committed to the public. We'd run two public consultation sessions. Our first was Saturday, March the 1st, which was the past weekend. And our second one is this evening. Process going forward, we will bring the budget back to council on March the 20th, and we'll be taking the feedback we receive from these consultations to the table. And there are members of council in the audience here to listen tonight. So some introductions. I'm joined by Aaron Richards, who's our Director of Community Development, Helen Young, who is our Manager of Finance, our Mayor Doug Glasser is in attendance, Councillor David LeBlanc, and Councillor Suzanne Leitz is in the background. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Helen. She's going to walk us through the draft budget. Probably going to take us about 25 minutes to get through the presentation, and then we'll open up the floor to questions from there. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. As Mark said, this is our second public presentation of the draft budget. I'm going to start this one off a little bit differently than I had the previous ones. I'm going to give some of our assessment role data that we received from property valuation services regarding our tax. So our residential taxable values for Stewiacke are $209,523,600. Out of that, the capped assessment value is $56,003,800, which means that the capped assessments for residential are $1,153,519,800. This represents 75% of residential tax being capped here in Stewiacke. The average capped assessment is approximately $153,000. So these numbers I'm reading from here are the numbers that we use to come up with tax billing. Commercial taxable is $20,225,000. There are no caps on commercial. Resource taxable is $1,658,200. There is a small cap of $92,400, bringing the capped assessments to $1,565,800. In addition to that, we have our residential exempt, which is valued at $75,900. These are lands that the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation occupies, and we do not collect tax on it. Commercial exemption includes our educational facilities, churches, land that is used for fiber optic transmission. This represents $11,138,600. Our resource exempt is $93,000. These are lands that are owned by the town of Stuart. Our resource farm exempt are agricultural lands. There is 1,038 acres in the town of Stuart, representing a value of $1,824,500, which again, we don't tax. And forest resource, which is our managed forest lands, there is 1,370 acres in the town of Stuart. So we have 892 dwelling units and 961 partial land parcels. And we have 611 cap assessments. So from that, we'll move right on to the next slide Mark has up there. Our average residential assessment is $171,918. The graph below just represents our tax rates over the years. Residential at 1.58 for both fiscal 25 as well as 26. Our commercial is 3.45. And that has been just about the same. That hasn't changed much. We have fire protection in there at 1%. Our wastewater base charge, $62.87. Not going to change. And our solid waste removal, I realized that I had made an error in this column. So the 105.24 should have been slid over to the F25 column. There's no increase in our waste removal for this year. I look back at the 2021 census for Stuart. We had 739 dwellings. And did a little bit of comparison on tax rates for Berwick, Port Hawkesbury, and Oxford and Middleton. Oxford and Milton being the most comparable in terms of dwellings, and their tax rates you can see are 0.79 and 4.28 commercial respectively, and Middleton has at 1.8% and 4.29% commercial. So we kind of fall in the middle there. Out of our tax revenue, we have mandatory expenses. Those mandatory expenses include fire protection, $363,909. Regional school board, $406,097. Below that, you'll see $65,000 set aside for regional housing. We are not obligated to provide any funding towards the province's deficit anymore. So that $65,000 will be approved and it will go into reserves and spent as directed also. Police protection services, $228,815, and protective other, $42,967. Protective other is our emergency measures plan and our crosswalk roads, those types of things. So we'll move on to the next slide, which is our general operating summary. And again, these numbers you see here, they're based on assessments. That's how these figures come about. So our tax revenue is estimated to be $3,123,197. Grants in lieu of taxes, $3,266. That is a grant that we received back for the property that we are seeing. Is occupying currently. Revenue from our own sources, $182,000. Unconditional transfers from government, which is our equalization grants, we estimate at $70,500. And conditional transfers from the government of $25,000, which goes towards the Empower program. Our expenses, legislative expenses are $111,015. Administrative, $759,855. Police protection, police protection, $228,815. Fire protection, $192,700. Protective other, $42,967. Transportation and Public Works, $770,058. Environmental health, $353,076. Planning and development, $93,445. Recreation and culture, $410,306,000. And our physical services, $625,949,000. Now, I know a couple of questions that had come out of the presentation on Saturday. People had asked for a percentage of budget that went towards council and staff remuneration. So our legislative remuneration is 2.2% of the budget. Administrative represents 12.4% of the budget for remuneration and our federal benefit obligations. Police protection takes in 6% of our budget, our overall budget. Fire protection, 5% of our overall budget. Protective other is very small, under 1% of our budget. Transportation and public works remuneration represents 11.4% of our budget. And environmental health remuneration is again under 1% of our budget. Recreation remuneration represents 5.9% of our budget. Bringing our total for wages and our federal burdens to 27% of the overall budget. I know that in private business, if you're running between 25 and 30% in your wage bracket, that you're operating fairly well. Next slide is our water utility operating budget. Our operating revenue from the water utility is $756,712. Our expenses for the company, $52,600. Water treatment, $362,677. Transmission and distribution, $58,700. And administrative and general expense, $100,373, bringing that total to $574,350. We add in depreciation of $122,000. Taxes of $34,000 and non-operating expenditures of $45,388, bringing the total expense to $775,738, with a deficit of $19,026. For those of you that are not aware, the water utility is not permitted to operate with a surplus. all of those dollars that are collected from the residents needs to bring back into the utility. Next slide, recreation and culture. And so the revenue from its known sources is $112,500. That represents community hall rentals, facilities, recreation programs, downtown decorating, youth programs, field rentals, and then the after-school program, as well as town day. Recreation and cultural expenses are $410,356. Operating at a deficit of $297,856. It's one of the two of the capital budget. 25-26. The water utility, $1,427,890. This represents $580,050 for Lewis Street, $847,840 for Pleasant Hill, for those two projects that weren't able to be completed in this fiscal year due to the cost. There's also in there an unknown for land acquisition for a water treatment plant. So there's some more studies that need to be done on sludge removal before we can get to the point of knowing where the water treatment plant would be located. The public works 25-26 capital budget includes a new half-ton for the public works. This was approved in the 24-25 budget. It just hasn't happened, so it's been carried forward. If it does happen before the end of this fiscal year, it will be removed from this capital budget. 45,000 for the Dennis Park Guardian, the back park and healing lot. 30,000 of the 45 was approved in the 24-25 budget. So there's an additional ask this year for $15,000. And $5 million for wastewater refurbishment. We have funded $2.5 million, which has been locked in GIC for last year, like interest. That will mature on April 23rd, I believe. We'll have access to those funds. We will have to use $1 million in capital reserves and $1.5 in the debt. 20,000 is the ask for paving of Joffrey Street from Riverside to Highway 2. 50,000 for the sidewalk on Main Street across from the town hall. 35,000 for cross culverts on Main Street West, and 25,000 for cross culverts on Sherbrooke Street, and 15,000 for shed repairs on Joffrey Street. Recreation has asked for $63,100. This would go towards a 50 by 50 asphalt pad. That project cost is $35,000. Recreation has applied for $28,000 in funding and bringing the surplus of $7,000, which the town will have to fund. Repair to the boardwalk at River Country Trail, $28,400. $17,000 in funding has been applied for, leaving $11,400 to come out of capital. That brings the 25-26 capital budget to a total of $6,721,720. Sorry, tongue tied. $6,721,290. 2026, the water utility is asking for 12 million. This represents the first phase of new plants and infrastructure. Again, at this time, we're not 100% sure what the figures are going to be. It's just ballparking it until we have the design and build and how much it is actually going to cost. Public Works has a 250,000 for a dump truck. That was approved in the 2024-25 budget. Paving, $100,000. That was approved in the 24-25 budget. And wayfinding signage, $50,000. That was also for in the 24-25 budget. Recreation, 26-27, $150,000 for trail resurfacing and upgrades, which brings the capital budget for 26-27 to $12,550,000. For 27-28, the water utility is asking for 3 million, this 13 million, which would represent the second phase of the water treatment plant. Again, could be 2-part phase, could be 3, could be 4. We don't know yet. We're not 100% sure. Public Works has $100,000 is set aside for paving. That was approved in the 2025 budget. Recreation and Culture has 75,000 for tennis court, 40,000 for ball fitness and expansion, and 40,000 for shade structure in Dennis Park. All of these 3 items were approved in the 24-25 budget. Total for 27-28, $13,255,000. Potential capital budget. And that concludes the presentation portion. Let's open the floor for questions.
If you have questions, if you could just identify yourself, your name and that you're a resident of the town of Stewiacke, and we'll limit it to 1 question at a time, and we'll come back to you in order. Everybody has an opportunity to speak. Are there any questions from the floor? Mr. Lloyd.
George Stewiacke. Look at the amount that's been allocated for land acquisition and such. There's no figure. Has any amount of funding is set aside for the well period. So,
Yeah, great question. So in August of 2024, we brought a report to council. That report spoke to the well studies that we're undergoing right now. The final stage of the well study is going to be completed, and we'll have a report to council in March. Based on that study, then we can hone in on what size of water treatment plant we need, the infrastructure required. That will give us a better understanding of the setbacks required, the amount of land that we would need. Then we can enter into those conversations and have a better estimate. Until we have all the information in front of us to put a plan forward, we can't really put a number down, but we're working as quickly as we can.
Can you tell me, in the income for recreation, are grants and donations and all that stuff included in that income? And now I just asked you.
Okay, yeah, no, I will tell you. So the answer is, no, the grants are not included. That is from other sources.
Are there any more questions from the floor?
Also, giving us significant gaps. Identified. If you identify any significant gaps in the budget.
No. The plan with this budget is to operate as lean as we possibly can for this year. And have a stable footing as we move to the bigger projects that are absolutely a need for.
Are there any other questions? And to Mr. Loy's comment about a gap we talked about on Saturday, just to reiterate for the people that weren't here on Saturday, that the budgets for the next 2 years, when we talk about the 12 million and 13 million for the water treatment plant, there were a lot of questions about that. That is definitely a gap in funding, but we've identified that and we've already started conversations with our MLA at the provincial level and our MP at the federal level to start talking about the potential for funding sources for that. We'll be on that over the course of the next year once we have more information on the project.
I might be responsible for helping yourself in terms of that. Then we'll leave the budget, but I guess my concern is these conversations were in place 4 years ago. And this is not to find out from not posturing, just your George. But I would laugh. The plan has to be in place for we're actually asking. And as a taxpayer, that's concerned. The full faith in this staff, we think we're doing an amazing job. But not knowing about that, I just don't forward. It does cause concern. Because we're dealing with not theory, there's process here. But we did not have a public meeting with planning advisory. Again, I'm not sure whether we just didn't want us to. We have to stop going in circles and move forward. And we have to do it quickly if we're not working as always right because we're still going from this. And at some point, there's going to be a catch up. I don't want to see that. My staff doesn't want to see that. But I'm employing that staff members of this because if we don't, there's going to be a crisis.
Yeah.
Keep working on it.
Yeah, concern heard, and I'll say this, that the Planning Advisory Committee had a meeting about a month ago. Councillor Osborne gave an update on that at the February 27th meeting. We went over some proposed options that are being discussed right now at the council table. The Planning Advisory Committee meets, I believe it's March the 19th, in about a week and a half to look over the next stages, and we'll get to that public meeting. And in terms of the process, we are moving as quickly as possible. The change order for the well testing was signed in August. We're just at the completion stage for that, and then we'll be able to get to the cost A and B cost estimates, which get us closer to next stage. It's priority number one. Any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions from the floor. We will remain here for a few minutes. If there's any questions for staff after the fact, anybody that's online, just to reiterate, you can send your questions to townhall@town@suyac.net, or feel free to call the office and connect to myself or Helen, our manager of finance, and we're happy to answer any questions for you from there. So if there are no further questions, we will conclude the meeting, sign off. Thank you very much for everybody for coming.